Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to another session. I'm so excited to have you today in our food safety webinar. Our topic today is how to deal with food poisoning complaint in your food business. To take you through, my name is Harrison Mathai. I'm a member of the Royal Society for Public Health based in UK. I'm a UK registered food safety trainer and consultant, approved to conduct training from HIFID awarding body for compliance and the Royal Society for Public Health based in UK. I've worked with various stakeholders in food business for over 20 years and I have a lot of experience in HACCP training, HACCP implementation, consultancy and food safety training. Welcome. We want to get to the introduction. What is food safety? Food safety is an essential part of food, and it's important for us to have safe food as we consume the food. So food is an important part of our lives, and it's a requirement for life. I mean, we all eat to live, we live to eat, and some people enjoy eating as a hobby. So we get some pressure from having food as part of our daily lives, and also we enjoy that for nutritional value. So when we select and consume food, we expect it to be safe, and that food is not going to cause illness, harm, or injury. For that matter, the expectation places the importance and responsibility to the people who are working with food, and that is enshrined in the law. Let's look at the definition of the food businesses that we work with. This covers a large variety of businesses and services, which includes the manufacturers, the caterers, the retailers, the wholesalers, and anybody who actually use food as part of their businesses. So whichever the type of the food operation, everyone who handles food has a legal duty to ensure that the food is safe to eat. High standards are achieved by ensuring that food is prepared, processed, stored, or served in your operation in a way that is safe to eat and does not cause any type of problem. So, what is food poisoning? When you talk about food poisoning, what is food poisoning? Food poisoning is any disease of infectious or toxic nature caused or thought to be caused by consumption of food or water. It is important for us to remember water is part of food, because most of the people don't look at water as part of food, and sometimes food poisoning will come from consumption of water. It usually occurs between 1 to 36 hours after eating contaminated or poisonous food. So food poisoning symptoms last between 1 to 7 days, and they may be abdominal pain, vomiting, fever, flu-like symptoms, dehydration, and sometimes somebody can collapse. So those are a few symptoms of food poisoning. So why don't we get food poisoning often? Sometimes you might consume food and you don't have food poisoning, but you don't understand why. It usually takes a large number of microorganisms to cause food poisoning, and they have to get to the food and multiply to large numbers so that they can cause illness. Food poisoning is actually determined by the bacterial load, the type of the bacteria, and that's why you find some people might not experience food poisoning even if they consume food that is contaminated. So basically, who is at risk when it comes to food poisoning? Every day, thousands of people in the world would suffer from food poisoning, and many of these will become very ill, and some of them will also die. The most at risk are the yopi. Yopi means young, old people, and already ill people, and unborn babies. So those are the most at risk when it comes to food poisoning. So some of the food poisoning illness may also cause miscarriage. They may also cause kidney failure and also cranial nerve paralysis. So food poisoning is such a big problem, and especially into third world countries, that we are having a lot of problems associated with such cases like miscarriage, as I said before, kidney failure, or cranial nerve paralysis. And that's why, as a food handler, as a person working with food, you really need to ensure that people do not have diseases or illness after consuming the food. So, what causes food poisoning? The main reason for food poisoning are negligence, ignorance, poor management, poor food safety culture, and failure to implement good hygiene practices. Those are the major problems, major causes of food poisoning. Effective instructions and training will prevent food poisoning, and if good hygiene practices are implemented, it really helps an organization or a business to ensure that food poisoning cases are eliminated. So, what is a case of food poisoning? What do we mean by food poisoning? Food poisoning is a person with infectious symptoms or toxic nature who has become ill as a result of eating contaminated food or water. It's important for us to remember water is part of that, and has provided a positive specimen or is confirmed to be part of a confirmed food poisoning outbreak. So it's important for us to remember that, because if we're going to deal with a food poisoning complaint, we need to understand what is a case of food poisoning. So let's look at that. A situation where somebody complains of food poisoning, when it comes to a customer, for example, a customer has come in, or he's been dining with you, he had breakfast in the morning, and after a few hours when he's coming for lunch or she's coming for lunch, she complains of, for example, having those symptoms of food poisoning like vomiting, diarrhea, or fever, and automatically that person assumes that whatever he consumed or she consumed at breakfast could be the cause of food poisoning. So we always know that in business or in hospitality industry, the customer is always right and the customer is a king. So when the person complains of food poisoning, we have to ensure that we know how to deal with that, because we don't want to upset the customer, but at the same time, we need to be sure before we can accept liability. So when a customer complains of food poisoning about the drinks or the food that they have consumed, how do you respond to that? It is critical for us to, number one, to know how to handle that, because you already have both rigor and moral responsibility about that customer's health. You remember you require that customer tomorrow and the day after for successful running of your business. So how do you respond? Number one, you need to first of all apologize to the customer for the predicament that they are in. You know, you have to show empathy, and that is important. When you sympathize with a person, it becomes easier even for the person to actually listen to you, and in case in future that person can be able to connect with how you dealt with the problem. So the third thing for you to do is to request or recommend the customer to have a medical examination to ascertain that that is food poisoning. Okay? And after that, you reassure the customer of the good hygiene practices the business have done or have gone to an extra mile to ensure that they prevent food poisoning or protect their health. And encourage the customer, of course, to share their medical results, and of course wish him the recovery. I need just to write down a few things, because it's important for us to remember that. We need, number one, to apologize. Apologize to the customer. Number two, show empathy. Number three, you recommend the customer to go for a medical examination. Okay? Those are a few steps that you're supposed to remember when you deal with the food poisoning case. It's important for us to note this point because we'll see how it's going to help us to deal with the situation so that not to escalate that to a further situation. Why do we need to respond like this to the customer? We know that a case of food poisoning takes between 1 to 36 hours for it to become systematic. For the person to show symptoms, it will take some time. And until a positive specimen has been provided and analyzed in a medical laboratory, we should never accept that responsibility, because most of the people, sometimes they don't remember what they consumed the previous night, and could be whatever that person consumed has caused food poisoning. In Europe, in some parts of the country, even in Kenya, CAP 254 does not absolve a food business the responsibility if the customer have a food poisoning from consuming the food. So it is important for you to know how to respond, not to accept liability, and yet it eventually turns out that the person did not have the food poisoning from your business. So eventually, you have to have the customer produce the proof of the whatever the person consumed, and when they go for a medical laboratory, they'll be able to know the kind of food they consume and the kind of microorganism that affected or caused the food poisoning. And that is also important for you so that you are able to know what could be the causal agent of that food poisoning. Some customers could also be used to sabotage your business. So it's important for you to know that, because if everybody complaining or your competitors are using some customers with malicious intention for having your brand being implicated on a case of food poisoning, you need to be very sure how to respond to that. And that's why you need to be vigilant and deal with such cases with a lot of caution. So some complaints will happen because also as a result of the consumer or the customer poor hygiene practices. So there are so many factors that you need to consider. Although remember, the customer is the king, the customer is always right, but also you have a responsibility to look after the business interest, and that is important in the long term. Okay, so why do we respond like that? Once we respond like that, we have to put it in we need to have a ledger or a complaint record. It's important to keep all food-related complaints in a company and provide, and this is going to help us to have an insight on the effectiveness of any quality management system if the business is having, for example, HACCP or ISO 22000. A record for complaint is important because we are going to have some data even for future planning. This helps in investigation of a root cause analysis, and especially where a complaint could trigger a situation where we need to improve the overall quality management system in the business. Okay, and using the record or using record keeping, it becomes easier to establish the complaint monitoring and the statistics, the deviation. It's a process that we can be able to look at in the long run in terms of within a given time how many complaints we had and whether the system is really working. It's something else we could use for feedback mechanism. Excessive complaints in a food business could trigger or justify prescribe a formal investigation, a scenario where the food safety management or food safety policy will need to be changed. Okay, and that is a good system for you to know how to improve eventually whatever you have in place. This can be also form a basis of training. For example, if your staff are having problems that are coming from poor personal hygiene practices, from the complaints you're able to find or to justify such training that is necessary, especially to control specific hazard that could be existing in your business. Okay? So we have key facts to the professionals that we need to remember. In CAP 254, because we're based in Kenya, it does not absolve you from any blame or responsibility if you provide unsafe food. So you could be prosecuted if you break the law relating to the personal hygiene, and the business also can be fined for selling unfit or poor quality business. They can be prosecuted and fined. The customer who get food poisoning or spoiled food would, of course, will stop buying from the business, and that means that you do not have, it affects the profit and the overall well-being of the business. Businesses that have food poisoning cases or poor hygiene cases cannot grow eventually, and I think that is something else that we really need to emphasize, because we've seen a situation where a business opens, there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of publicity, and after a short while, like 6 months to a year, the business fizzles out. Some of the problems could be associated with food safety complaints, because a situation of food safety is a little bit unique. It's not like customer service. I give you an example. You could visit a restaurant and wait for 30, 40 minutes before you could get your service, or you get the waiter to attend your needs. You could ask for the manager, for example, and complain, say, I was sitting here, or we've been here, and we've been waiting for a long time before we could get our order being sorted. Of course, the manager can explain and deal with that situation there and there. But on a food poisoning case, you do not have that laxity, you do not have that privilege to deal with a food safety complaint within the organization. Remember, a case of food poisoning will take between 1 to 36 hours, and that means that whoever consumed the food that was contaminated or poisonous will not be in a position to come and complain in the business. Very few people will come back and complain of food poisoning cases. So, of course, if I consumed something last night, today I'll be somewhere else looking for medical help, for example, look for medicine and stuff like that. So I'll not be able to come back to the business and complain that. And that affects my productivity, because as a person who's supposed to be doing something else, and when you're sick, you're not able to continue with your daily lives. If you had appointments, you have to cancel them. If you have to go and do some work, people are depending on you, you will not work. So it is something else that really affects our daily life. And if I know that a business caused food poisoning, if I knew that I went to a business and I had food poisoning from that business, definitely I'm not going to recommend it. I'm not going to have my friends or my relative coming back. And those are the reasons that do happen when you have food poisoning cases happening often in your business. So what is our resolution? From this webinar, we need to know that food poisoning leads to customer complaints and have a negative publicity to our businesses. So we really need to minimize or eliminate it completely. Food poisoning cases affects the profitability of the business and increases the advertising and marketing costs. So you have a situation where you have food poisoning situations or cases, and then you think because people are not coming back to your business, you have to advertise again, you have to do another marketing. So eventually that affects your advertising and marketing costs, okay? Happy, satisfied customers would increase your business, because you will have more of them doing reference, and that also have a good brand reputation, which means you have more reference and you have happy, more patrons. So it's important for us to eliminate food poisoning. Good hygiene improves the working conditions, which results to staff morale, and also they will lower the staff turnover, which increases the productivity in the long run. Because if you have food poisoning, also your staff could be exposed to those food poisoning cases in your business. And that is important for us to remember if you're running a business. So how do we do team empowerment? For Aspire Food Safety Standards, which is an approved food safety training center in East Africa, we do have accredited food safety training for level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, both in manufacturing and catering. So we do have food safety training on those levels, and they are all accredited from UK awarding body, which are HIFID, awarding body for compliance, HABC, or RSPH, the Royal Society for Promotion of Health, based in UK. HACCP food safety trainings and consultancy, we also do that, and implementation. So if your business require to have any of the HACCP or food safety training, you can always contact us for such services. We also do food safety audits and risk management, especially if you want to know whether your staff requires such needs. If you want to know whether the business requires training needs on food safety or quality management systems, you can always contact us. We also do food safety risk management and assessment for root cause analysis. In a situation where a customer has taken you to a court, or your business have been taken to a court, we can always do a root cause analysis, perhaps to help to understand what caused that and how we can come up with countermeasures to prevent that reoccurring in future. Okay, so eventually that's what we do, and that is the end of our training. To contact us, you'll be able to get in touch with us, and this is our number, hotline number, +254 725 009705, or +250 780 009705. You can always write to us if you have any problem or any question relating to food safety or HACCP at info@aspirefoodsafety.co.ke, and you can always visit our website www.aspirefoodsafety.co.ke. Thank you for your attendance. We hope that you've enjoyed this webinar, and in future we are going to have another webinar, and you can always join us for another one. Thank you very much, and bye-bye for the time being.